Goomy! What is up, guys? Steven here, and today I'm going to be talking about the team that I brought to Fort Wayne. So there were actually two mid-season showdowns in Fort Wayne this past weekend. So it was only a couple hours away from where I'm living, and figured I would go that way. The team ended up actually doing really well and performed more consistently than I would have expected. So the first day, Saturday, lost in finals, so got second place, and went 6-2 in sets over the course of the tournament. And then the second day on Sunday actually ended up winning the whole thing and went 8-0. So I really wanted to just kind of share this team because it's unique, it's fun, and yeah, so let's get into it. So this is the team. Whimsicott, Inteleon, Togekiss, Mr. Mime, Bisharp, Jellicent are the six. So need to give a little bit of a shout out to Nails, who originally said Mr. Mime. So I was team building, and we were really looking for just like fake out support, some sort of speed control, and Mr. Mime came up, and it was kind of like a meme at first. But then looking at the stats, and the fact that it can run Eviolite actually makes it really bulky. And we ended up putting on the team, and it's actually a really super integral part of the team. And it does a lot of work, and it actually gets brought to a lot of matchups. Mr. Mime is super fun, and the team as a whole is fun. Bisharp is kind of another less common pick, but it works really well on this team. So let's just get into each of the individual members. So Whimsicott, nothing really too special here. So it's just Sash, Max. So the move choice, Dazzling Gleam. I really like Dazzling Gleam on this team for a couple of reasons. So one, it just kind of helps you to break sashes while you're really hitting the target that Moonblast would be going after anyway. And that's really big on this team because it is HO and everything's really frail. So just being able to break sashes and get kills is super big. Tailwind is obviously there. Again, HO, Whimsicott's going to run Tailwind. Taunt is really there as a trick room deterrent, as well as to potentially taunt opposing Whimsicotts in situations where I'm at +1 speed, or if I Tailwind and they don't turn 1. And then the majority of my team are special attackers, and that's why Fake Tears really is so nice. Can just lower the SPDF of something and just try to nuke things turn 1. Yeah, so that's that. It's a Whimsicott. Nothing really too special here. So Inteleon. Inteleon is something that I love in this meta. It's super fun, and I really like the speed tier that it's in. So it's actually base 119 speed, and that allows it to function really well on this team because it is faster than everything else. So that sets up for good combinations with either max airstream, raising the speed of partners, or things like max darkness, lowering SPDF to then go into like spread dazzling gleams, stuff like that. And Inteleon is actually really good. It's very strong. Almost all of the time that you're going to bring it, you want to Dynamax it. Almost every single time that it's brought, it's going to Dynamax. And that's why I'm running Hydro Cannon. So Hydro Cannon over Hydro Pump, there are certain calcs that are better for you. So like the standard Gmax Charizard set that's been running around, Hydro Cannon actually just OHKOs that, whereas Hydro Pump does not. You just get that extra power. Inteleon is actually stronger than you would think. So having a super fast Life Orb user is pretty common, but Inteleon I think does it better than most, and it does particularly well against the Durant teams that have been running around because it's able to hit pretty much everything on those teams super effectively. And Max Geyser actually just OHKOs Dynamax Durant. So outspeeding it and just OHKOing it really puts a lot of pressure onto the opponent and forces them really to not lead Durant, which is where it wants to be sitting. Having Airstream is super nice to help with speed control. And then in the last slot, I went between Mudshot and Ice Beam. So Mudshot is really there if you're more concerned about Duraludon. There are ways to play around Duraludon with the team that are more or less consistent depending on the set you're facing. But the nice thing about Ice Beam is, again, one, you can break sashes with Max Hailstorm, and then the other thing is that like fake tears into Max Hailstorm is the only way that you can just OHKO Togekiss turn 1 if you do end up leading with Inteleon plus Whimsicott. So that just puts more pressure, and you can get rid of a redirection Mon early in the game. So that's why I ended up going with Ice Beam. The finals matchup may have been different if I had Mudshot, just because there was a Duraludon. So really either or are good. I just prefer Ice Beam. It also helps with Rotom Mow, which the team doesn't love to deal with. So that's just another target that goes after. So Togekiss, Scope Lens, Super Luck. So 50% chance of crit is really, really nice. I have pretty standard moveset, so Air Slash, again, Max Airstream, Speed Control is all great. Dazzling Gleam is wonderful as it's able to hit multiple targets, and each one has a 50% chance to crit. And Fairy Coverage is just nice in the meta in general. And then Heat Wave, so I have Heat Wave again just because that helps to have a backup plan against things like Durant, hits Excadrill, which is generally pretty annoying. Corviknight is a Pokemon that has to be prepared for, and that's one of the ways that you can deal with it is to max Flare into it. Same thing goes for Ferrothorn. So it is the only fire move on the team, and that makes it pretty critical to have. And then Follow Me. So I have Follow Me in lieu of something like Protect, because if I am Dynamaxed, I can still use Follow Me like it's Protect. And then Redirection is again, obviously good just in general. So Togekiss is, again, pretty standard. I like this Mon a lot. There's a reason it has so much usage. And the Scope Lens set, it is pretty hit or miss. I feel like Weakness Policy may have been more consistent, but Scope Lens does help in certain matchups, and that's why I chose to go with it. So, Mr. Mime, the Mime. So, this Pokemon actually puts in a ton of work and did great for the team, and ultimately was probably my favorite Pokemon on the team, and it comes in a lot of games. It does really well in a lot of matchups. So with Eviolite, Mr. Mime is actually really, really bulky. So it's able to live basically any non-super effective max move, which for a support Pokemon is really critical. Again, the EVs are not complicated at all. So it's just max HP with bulk and then max speed. So Mr. Mime actually hits a really good speed tier of base 100. And because of the way that the new speed mechanics work with speed updating mid-turn, Icy Wind from a fast Pokemon is really great because it gives you a chance to just Icy Wind, slow something down, and then attack it. Fake Out Pressure is great, and it's one of the fastest Fake Outs in the metagame. Really, Raichu is the only Fake Out Mon that'll outspeed you because you even outspeed things like Togedemaru. Helping Hand is always just a great support move. It lets you get off a one-time nuke, and you can even Helping Hand in those Fake Out matchups. Knowing that Helping Hand has more priority. So it really can give you a lot of flexibility turn one when you're leading with Mr. Mime. Freeze Dry is really great on this team because it helps with a couple of Pokemon that would give the team a lot of problems otherwise, being Gastrodon. Gastrodon is obviously pretty threatening when you're using a team that has Inteleon as one of its main ways of dealing damage. And also Rotom Wash can be a threat, but again, Freeze Dry does really well against that as long as it is not Assault Vest. And we covered Icy Wind already. So Bisharp. So this actually does a lot of work for the team. So Bisharp was originally put on the team because of the Grimmsnarl matchup. The Grimmsnarl matchup was not great. And Bisharp really kind of invalidates Grimmsnarl in a lot of ways, in that you're able to, you're immune to the Prankster moves, and you have an opportunity to Dynamax and deal a lot of damage against those types of teams. The moveset is fairly standard: Iron Head, Sucker Punch, Assurance, Low Sweep. Again, Low Sweep is great. It lowers speed. Speed control is super important to this team. I could see the value of Brick Break in that slot as well. But Mr. Mime does have Screen Cleaner, so we already have a way around screens. So the reason for Assurance over another fighting move like Throat Chop is that Bisharp actually is slower than everything else on the team, barring Jellicent, and there are a lot of double target moves on the team. So there's Dazzling Gleam on Whimsicott, Icy Wind on Mr. Mime, Dazzling Gleam and Heat Wave on Togekiss. So all of those moves do the spread damage, so we have the opportunity to deal damage, and then Assurance, which doubles in power when the opponent has taken damage already that turn. And this pairs really well with Mr. Mime in that you can actually Icy Wind something and slow it down and then Assurance it. So for example, if an Arcanine gives you an attack raise with Intimidate, you can actually Icy Wind and Assurance and OHKO it before it even moves because of the new speed mechanics. So Mr. Mime Bisharp actually beats Arcanine, which is insane. Sucker Punch is great for those times when the opponent is able to get a Tailwind up, or you can't really afford to Airstream to keep up with your opponent. So that just lets you kind of check big threats that are sitting at medium to low health. Steel move is obviously very good, and then Low Sweep can also be used as Max Knuckle. So Bisharp sees a lot of value when it Dynamaxes. It can also lower Spadef for the other special attackers on the team. So finally, Jellicent is on the team. So I literally just copied the Aaron Trailer EV spread just because it made sense from a bulk perspective. But really, the main difference is that I don't have the 4 speed. I am actually 0 speed Quiet Nature with 0 speed IVs, and I'm holding the Room Service item. So what's really neat about Jellicent's speed tier is that with the Room Service item, you actually underspeed Rhyperior and Gastrodon. I think it's Gastrodon by 1 point. In Trick Room with the Room Service item. So you're able to be faster than Trick Room Mons before Trick Room is set up, and then you're slower than them, or you're still faster than them when Trick Room is set up because you're slower. So this really helps a lot in the Trick Room matchup. It makes facing Rhyperior a lot easier, and this thing also really helps with Conkeldurr. So I'm not actually running Trick Room on this Jellicent. So I'm Will-O-Wisp Strength Sap. So for the reason for that is really most of the time I don't want to be setting up Trick Room because my team is so fast. And Will-O-Wisp helps to cripple things long term that could switch out later in the game. So that's the disadvantage of Strength Sap, is that it's not a permanent drop, whereas Will-O-Wisp is. And the other moves are pretty standard: Water Spout, Shadow Ball. Water Spout is great. When you are in Trick Room, you're so slow, you can just do a bunch of damage to opposing Rhyperior, and this also helps to deal with like the Torkoal matchup. And then Shadow Ball just does good chunk damage to pretty much everything else, including opposing Jellicent. So next, gonna get into some common leads that I would use with this team and kind of talk about how they function. So Whimsicott and Teleon. So there's a lot of certain teams just cannot handle this lead. So that's kind of the first thing that I look at when using the team is like, do they have anything that beats Whimsicott and Teleon, just period? And if there is, no fake out user, then really most of the time this is a decent lead. You have a lot of flexibility in this position. So like I touched on earlier, fake tears into a max move is very strong. And Teleon already is super strong. And fast. So as long as your opponent doesn't also lead with Whimsicott, then you're pretty much guaranteed to outspeed almost everything in the metagame that isn't holding a Scarf. And that's what makes this so threatening, because fake tears is a very viable play. And if they do lead Whimsicott, then really you can just trade Tailwinds and attack into the partner as well. Dazzling Gleam with Max Darkness is also a pretty interesting play that can be made in these with this lead, because Whimsicott is actually slower than Inteleon, so you can Max Darkness, lower the SPDEF of both of your opponents, and then Dazzling Gleam. So that's a really good way, again, to get around sashes and bulkier threats, just depending on the matchup. But this is a really powerful lead. It's difficult to deal with without fake out support. So similarly, you can lead with Togekiss sitting next to Whimsicott. So this does a lot of the same things, either tailwinding, fake tears, and just having Togekiss Dynamax and try to chunk something for a bunch of damage. This is particularly good in matchups where you know that the opponent has max Airstream as well, because you can keep up the speed on your side of the field and keep a lot of pressure. So if you want to go all out offensive, leading with Togekiss and Teleon is actually pretty viable. So you have options turn one of which of these two you really do want to Dynamax, as well as different. They both have speed control with max Airstream, and then you also have the redirection option with Togekiss. If you do need to like redirect an electric move or a grass move away from Inteleon. So this is a really strong lead as well, and does well against slower teams that can't necessarily handle just the offensive pressure turn one. So Mr. Mime Togekiss, so this again can do a lot of similar things, but it's better in matchups where you're going to have a faster fake out. So you can fake out Helping Hand. Togekiss is almost certainly going to Dynamax turn one when you lead with this. And then just depending on what the opponent has, Mime will use the appropriate support move, and then Togekiss can launch off a 50% chance crit Dynamax move. So same thing, Inteleon Mime is very good against, it does very well against opposing fake outs when you have faster fake outs. And again, you can Helping Hand support, which is very strong. And Icy Wind also helps to slow things down. So even if they do lead with Tailwind support, you can like fake out Airstream the Whimsicott and get the speed advantage even if the opponent Airstreams, or you can even just Icy Wind Airstream, and then you're essentially faster anyway, I think. And it's just a good combo, and Mime is bulky enough that it can generally get off multiple Icy Winds in a game. And then finally, Mr. Mime Bisharp is one of my favorite leads with the team. It does really, really well. So like I touched on earlier, Icy Wind into Assurance is super great because you get to slow down both opponents and really get to target down what you want to go after with Bisharp. Bisharp doesn't necessarily have to Dynamax, which is great too, because you can save that in the back with like Togekiss or Inteleon, and save that as a threat in the back, because these two alone put a lot of offensive pressure, even against opposing fire types. Really, the only fire type that this doesn't do well against is Charizard, because it is a speed tie with Mime, and it's pretty much always going to Dynamax. And Bisharp with Assault Vest is actually pretty bulky and can boost its defense with Steel Spike as well. So as a Dynamax user, being paired next to Mime, it's very good. But you also have the flexibility to not necessarily Dynamax, and this ultimately is the lead that puts a ton of pressure on opposing Grimmsnarl teams, because leading Grimmsnarl is fairly common, but this kind of invalidates Grimmsnarl, and those teams are built around screens and around that speed control. So trying to invalidate that is super nice for the team. So these are probably the two biggest problems for the team. So Raichu is really annoying because it's one of the only things that has a faster fake out than Mr. Mime, and it puts a lot of pressure onto the two Pokemon that are most likely to Dynamax, being Inteleon and Togekiss, because it does carry Nuzzle. So that just puts a lot of pressure onto the team. Really, Raichu next to anything that can max Airstream is super annoying, because you can't really lead Whimsicott, because you'll just get faked out and Airstreamed. And Mr. Mime also doesn't do great because you lose the fake out speed tie, and then they're still going to be faster even if you Airstream, because they can Airstream. So that's why Raichu is super duper annoying for the team to deal with. Nuzzle is an annoying move, and Raichu is actually really good. So currently the best way to play around it really is, Bisharp is a great answer, as well as, Bisharp really is a great answer, and Mime also can do a decent job just by slowing it down with Icy Wind and playing well around it. Milotic is also annoying because in a lot of matchups, Icy Wind is such a good play, and the team is full of special attackers. And Icy Winding obviously gives Milotic a special attack boost, and it is very specially bulky, so it can be an absolute menace to take down. And this is really why Milotic is also really difficult to deal with. But these two really are the things that I would say give the team a lot of problems. Obviously, the team isn't perfect, and there are other things that can be challenging, but I would say that these two are the ones that I worry about the most and don't like to see the most in team preview. So here is the team code. Definitely appreciate you guys watching. This team is super fun. I had a lot of fun at the tournament in Fort Wayne. The two tournaments in Fort Wayne. Obviously, it was nice to do well, but more than that, it was really neat just to meet some more people in the Pokemon community, in the VGC community. Everyone that I met was really, honestly, super nice, super cool, and I'm looking forward to continuing to compete. I'm not sure if I'm going to go full out to try to get a Worlds invite, but just getting to meet people, play a game that I really enjoy playing, and just spending time with my girlfriend for the weekend made the whole trip a really great experience. The team was super fun. I hope you guys enjoy the team, and I will see you all next time. Peace.